There are many masters of Chinese painting, and this is a tale about a person who had a particular talent. Long, long ago, there lived a young boy called Yin, who lived in the poorest village in the whole of China. Oh, it was so poor. The chimney pots were cracked, the roofs had fallen in, and the pathway that led to the great palace that was far away had bumps and potholes. But this didn't bother Yin. Oh no, you see, he loved to draw. He used to find pieces of chalk on the road and draw things on the path of things he saw in the village, like Mr. and Mrs. Hong on their way to the market. Hello! One day, whilst Yin was doing his drawings, he heard footsteps come up behind him and stop. And when he went to have a look, he saw an old man leaning over his shoulder looking at the drawings. He had a long nose and pointy ears that were a little bit waxy. His skin was slightly green, and he had a beard that went from the tip of his chin all the way down to the tips of his toes. Are these your drawings? Oh, they're very good. Ever considered painting? Ah, here, take this. With this, you'll really be able to bring your drawings to life. But you may only use it for the good of the people. There you are. Yin went to go and thank the old man, but when he looked up, the old man had gone. Yin turned back to look at the old and tatty paintbrush that was chipped, and the bristles were uneven, and there were still bits of dried up paint in them. Sorry. But to Yin, it was like holding a rod of solid gold, and he couldn't wait to try it out. So using the money he saved up from working in the paddy fields, he bought some ink and some paper, sat it down by the road, and looked for something to paint. You, sir, stay still for me. Yin stood back to look at his painting of a beautiful cow. Nothing magical had happened. But then, the cow's head began to move. Its ears started to twitch, and then its whole body turned, and it started to walk up the far end of the piece of paper until it was a tiny dot. Then that dot started to get bigger and bigger until it looked like the cow was at a charge, and it jumped out the page and ran He couldn't believe his eyes. And he couldn't wait to try it out again. But then he remembered the words of what the old man had told him, that he could only use the paintbrush for the good of the people. And then he had a light bulb moment. Although in those days they were probably called lantern moments. Yes, he had a lantern moment. He could use the paintbrush to repaint the whole village. He repainted Mr. Shin's chimney pot, he repainted Mr. Ho's roof, and most importantly, he painted the pathway that led to the great palace that was far away. Now, at the time, living in the great palace was the very old, very grumpy, very evil and selfish emperor of China. He sat in his throne in a great hall that was filled with tapestries, tables upon tables upon tables of good food. A roaring fire sat behind him, and most importantly, the room was filled with pretty women. I'm bored. Nothing ever exciting happens in China. And just as he said those words, the doors of the hall swung open, and in came a little servant boy who had news for the great emperor. Oh, great emperor! I have heard news of this boy who paints things, and anything he paints, it comes to life. The emperor sat up in his chair and demanded that his guards were to go off and find this boy and have him brought to him at once. A few days passed, and still no sign of this boy. And the emperor sat in his throne, growing more and more impatient. But soon the doors of the hall opened, and in came the guards, dragging poor Yin. They pushed him to the floor and prized the paintbrush out his hand and handed it to the emperor. So, you're this boy who's been painting all these wonderful things? Well, I want you to paint me a mountain of gold. And Yin stood up and shook his head and told the emperor that he could only use the paintbrush for the good of the people. You dare disobey me? Away with you! Lock him in the dungeons! And poor Yin was locked in the deepest, darkest dungeon. Meanwhile, back up in the Great Hall, the emperor was having a Lantin moment of his own. I'm the Emperor of China. I know how to do this. You bring me some paper, and you fetch me some ink and roll up my sleeves. Roll up my sleeves. And the emperor then began to paint himself his mountain of gold. But it didn't rise out the paper, nothing magical happened. And then he came to the conclusion that it must be the boy who was magic, and he was to be brought to him at once. And poor Ying once again was dragged back up to the Great Hall and pushed down in front of the emperor, who had an evil smile on his face. You know, Yin, I am the Emperor of China, leader of all the people. So if you paint something for me, you're really painting something for them. Yin stood up and, not wishing to go back to the dungeon, asked the emperor what he would like first. Well, I would like a great ocean! And Yin painted that ocean, and soon outside the palace was a brand new, sparkling ocean. And on that ocean, I would like the world's biggest dragon boat with 1,000 silk white sails, a massive dragon head at this end, and a curling tail at the other. And Yin painted that boat, and soon as it sat upon the waters, the emperor strutted outside and climbed onto the boat. A little breeze, Yin, paint me a little breeze. And Yin began to paint little wisps of wind underneath the sails. More wind! Paint me more wind! I wish to go further and faster than any emperor has ever gone before. And Yin painted the emperor more wind. And he painted in a few clouds. And a few bigger clouds. And a few clouds that were bigger and thicker and darker, until Yin had painted the greatest storm he had ever seen. And out of the ocean, it pulled the emperor's boat down, down, down into the depths of the ocean. Meanwhile, back on land, Yin quickly painted himself a horse and rode back to the village, to which he finished repainting everything. And long after the emperor died, a new one was appointed, and he was much nicer. On Tuesdays, he let people come into the great palace to play ping pong. And he also heard the story of Yin, and appointed him his royal painter for all the people. And they all lived happily ever after, until the ends of their days. And so may it be with us. Thank you very much.